As Unitarian Universalists in Canada, we say we have 7 principles to guide our choices, 6 sources to nourish our spirits, and 5 aspirations to help us grow. And today, as John noted, we're considering our 5th aspiration, to be spiritually grounded. We seek transformation through personal spiritual experiences and shared ritual. And I see this aspiration in particular is really sort of the place of growth for Canadian Unitarian Universalism. UC Mississauga was founded in 1954, almost 70 years ago now, and it was part of this wave of small humanist fellowships that emerged across Canada. And at that time, we were really closely aligned with humanism, and this was a place of free thinking and working for a better society. And there was a popular joke, I think, in the early 70s that Unitarians were the NDP at prayer, and coffee was our sacrament. But as we are theologically alive, and over the years with the influence of Buddhism and neo-paganism and people changing and growing, more rituals and ceremonies have been added to our UU calendar. And so we really are, I think, in this stage of becoming both spiritual and religious, seeking to be theologically alive and spiritually grounded. So we're still sort of figuring out what words like spirituality and spirit mean to us. I use the word spirit to refer to the wholeness of the self, our whole beingness, that mind, body, emotion, all together, and yet also more than the sum of its parts. For many, spirit also refers to that greater whole, that divine, sacred God, universe, the mystery that surrounds us all. In my sense that this sort of aspect of us, that spiritual aspect of living is a little bit like the air we breathe. We notice when it's missing and our lives feel constricting and tight. Anyone who has asthma knows what that feels like. And we also notice when life is too intense and blowing us about in a storm. And I think that's sometimes why when people first come to a religious community, I know it happens here at UCM, you just sit in the back and cry. And perhaps these days you watch with your videos off. Sometimes the world's just too much with us. And so spirit may be intangible, but it's also vital to our well-being. And so in uncertain times, and I'd say right here, right now, qualifies as uncertain times, spiritual experiences help ground us and they keep us rooted while those storms rage around us and blow us off our feet. Spiritual practices help us develop resilience. They don't mitigate or end the worst of times, but they do remind us that we'll be okay, that this too shall pass, that there is still good and beauty in the world, and that we are cared for and not alone. It really, I think, for me, spiritual experiences are what helps us feel alive. And I think spiritual practices can be most simply described, or spiritual experiences can be most simply described as moments that either take you deeper within yourself or take you farther outside of yourself. They can ground you more firmly so that you hear that still small voice within, that you learn to trust your intuition and know that you know what you need. Or they can bring you outside of yourself into connection and conversation with something greater, that wordless, visceral experience of belonging to the whole, of being embraced or held by a greater presence. And while our aspiration says we seek transformation through personal spiritual experiences, for me, I've always felt it as less of a transformation and more of an expansion. Spiritual experiences expand us, remind us that we're more than just our jobs, our bodies, our everyday selves. So we're kind of like TARDISes. You know, Doctor Who, that blue police box. We are all infinitely bigger on the inside. And regular spiritual practices remind us that there's depth and meaning within us, and it expands our sense of self all the way down and deep. And experiencing again that sense of connection to the wondrous greater whole expands the sense of self high and wide. People often talk about feeling a sense of oneness dissolving into all the things that are around them. And I think this is kind of that golden spiral I spoke about last week, that spiral that has the self at the center and goes out to community, to the earth, to the universe, infinitely expanding. And our spiritual lives are like that as well. The going outwards into connection and a going inwards into greater self-knowledge. And so spiritual experiences like this, sometimes they're rare, sometimes you can cultivate them. And so ongoing practices are often the best way to find yourself in those moments. And the good thing is those spiritual practices don't require leaving the world and going and meditating on a mountaintop, although maybe you're called to that, and that's great. But you can seek that sense of expansion right where you are. And almost anything can be a spiritual practice if it's done with a matter of attention and awareness. And I think this is why this is a growth area for us. We don't have a distinct spiritual practice as you use the way I associate the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, with Christianity, or the loving kindness meditation, may you live with ease, may all beings live with ease, with Buddhism. And that gives us that scope. We're free to search for a practice that works for us as individuals in our own experiences. For some of us, it may be prayer, it may be meditation, it might be singing, it might be reading the tarot cards. For me, lighting a chalice and watching the flame is one of my practices, and that's probably one that's a specific sort of UU practice. But I also write in a gratitude journal because that makes me pay attention to the good in my life. For some, running can be a spiritual practice. It's getting into that zone and losing a sense of self. All of these are ways that just help you feel alive and connected and rooted. There's a branch of Tibetan Buddhism here in the West that teaches an enlightened way to shop. And it's based on a Tibetan folk belief that an object or landscape may possess a certain quality called yun. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yun gives objects a resonance, a rightness, a sense of grace. And the object will appear almost luminous because your eyes are attracted to it. There's a sense of recognition, and an ineffable something shines through. And this isn't something that's obvious. It takes a while to start discerning these things. It takes practice. But it means that shopping can be a spiritual practice. It's an attentive seeking out of objects that resonate with you. And I discovered this practice in an essay by the Reverend Jalen Scott, and she's a UU community minister, who said that seeking clothing that is yun has become a vital spiritual practice for her during her gender transition. As a Black man in the US becoming a woman, Jalen found herself struggling with gender norms and also family expectations. So much so that choosing clothing became a source of pain. It became a really intense part of her struggle to fully embrace her identity. And as she studied Buddhism and discovered this practice, she began to intentionally seek out clothing that felt yun to her. And so shopping switched from being a source of pain to an experience of grace. Jalen slows down. She takes her time to find the pieces, the clothing that speaks to her, and finds that they are the ones that feel just right when she tries them on. And so for her now, the dressing room is a sacred meditation cave. Spiritual practices are experiences that help you feel connected, rooted, and resilient, and they develop through attention and awareness. My hope is that all of us find something like that in our lives that helps us through. The Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker is the former dean of Star King, a UU seminary in the States. And she once said that spirituality is concerned with moving from a place of existential isolation towards communion with the greater whole. From isolation to communion, she says, we seek to live deeply rooted in knowing and feeling that we are connected to one another and to the earth, that our life is held in the embrace of something larger than ourselves, a wisdom, a presence, a grace whose beatitude is accessible to us. Here in Canada, we say we seek this connection through personal spiritual experiences and through shared ritual. And as John was saying this morning, shared rituals matter. No matter how good our intentions, how strong our desire, we can't always access the awareness and attention that brings a sense of connection. Often when we are most in need, we feel the most isolated. God goes silent. Our inner voice is critical. We sit for meditation and just watch our thoughts spin faster. Or it may be that our spiritual practices are delightful. We know we're fine and we feel that wondrous connection to the whole, and yet we still feel lonely. We need community, and we need those shared rituals that create energy that feeds our spirit. If you've ever attended a Blue Jays game in person, it feels entirely different than watching it on TV. There's that visceral aliveness to sports events. It's why people become dedicated followers of a particular team, because you get to belong and participate in this great shared energy. And it's really the shared energy that we're all missing so much right now, whether we find that at a Blue Jays game or a concert or right here on a Sunday morning. We get glimmers of it here together on Zoom, certainly with our laughter yoga, that energy comes alive, but it's not quite the same as being together in the same room, experiencing each other together. And so I think it's been wonderful that we've embraced ritual and ceremony and are bringing it back in our own way, because it enhances our sense of shared meaning, it supports our shared energy. So we have these ceremonies now that give shape to our Unitarian Universalist year. We flow together into community in September with the water ceremony. We enter the dark of the year honoring loss and grief with the ritual of mourning. And then we move through the dark to arrive at the fire ceremony, which we'll hold next week, where we celebrate that light at the heart of all life, when we return to that spark of energy. And after that, we head towards March, where we celebrate the spring renewal of the land, and we close out our church year with the flower ceremony, which honors life's astonishing diversity and honors our own diversity as well. This dance through the seasons of the land and its elements, and through the seasons of life, is what binds us and connects us together. And as well as that larger dance, we have those weekly rituals, lighting the chalice and singing, sharing joys and sorrows, sharing silence, holding hands. These bind us together as we light the chalice, give each other blessings. And like anything else, we have to participate in ceremony for it to work. We have to open ourselves to the moment, to be willing to feel. And that takes practice and intention. Those times where we get to connect with the ministry, to feel physically and emotionally more than ourselves, to feel ourselves held, are vital. And we don't always reach it, but we seek it constantly through these personal spiritual practices and through our shared rituals. And we can't always get there, and it's not failure, it's just part of the experience. What really matters is the trying, is setting those intentions. As people of the chalice, we've been stretching ourselves, embracing new theologies, seeking to be radically inclusive to all, to be actively engaged in healing the world, to be deeply connected. And finally, to be spiritually grounded through spiritual experiences and shared ritual. These are our 5 aspirations, and may we use them to help us grow as individuals and as a community. In these uncertain times, let us seek out ways to be spiritually grounded, to find our connections, to be rooted and resilient. May we trust our intuition and experience the wonder of all that is. May we be held in the warmth and light of the child's community. May we be held in the golden spiral. May we know we are part of this whole. So say we all.